ਸਪਾਈਸ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਸੁਣ ਰਹੇ ਦੋਸਤੋ, ਸ਼ਾਮਲ ਹੋ ਗੁਰਪ੍ਰੀਤ ਸਿੰਘ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਇਹ ਨਿਊਜ਼ ਸ਼ੋਅ ਵਿੱਚ। ਸਾਡੀ ਅੱਜ ਦੀ ਖਾਸ ਮਹਿਮਾਨ ਐਨੀ ਹੋਣਾ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਨਸਲਾਂ ਵਿਰੋਧੀ ਕਾਰਕੁਨ ਵੀ ਹੈ, ਟੀਚਰ ਵੀ ਹੈ। ਸੋਜੀ ਦਾ ਕਾਫੀ ਮਸਲਾ ਸਮੇਂ ਭਖਿਆ ਹੋਇਆ ਇੱਕ ਅਜਿਹੀ ਵਿੱਦਿਆ ਪ੍ਰਣਾਲੀ ਜਿਸ ਦੇ ਰਾਹੀਂ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਮਲਿੰਗੀ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਬਾਰੇ ਗਲਤ ਧਾਰਨਾਵਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦੂਰ ਕਰਨ ਦਾ ਯਤਨ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਸਕੂਲਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਖਿਲਾਫ ਘਿਰਨਾ ਘਟਾਉਣ ਦੇ ਲਈ। ਪਰ ਹੋ ਇਹ ਰਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਸੱਜੇ ਪੱਖੀ ਤਾਕਤਾਂ ਨੇ ਇਸ ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਅੱਤ ਚੁੱਕੀ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਰੋਸ ਵਿਖਾਵੇ ਜਾਰੀ ਨੇ ਔਰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਟੀਚਰਸ ਜਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਮਾਪੇ ਇਸ ਪ੍ਰਣਾਲੀ ਦੀ ਹਿਮਾਇਤ ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਆ ਕੇ ਧਮਕਾਇਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਘੇਰਾਬੰਦੀ ਕੀਤੀ ਜਾ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ। ਸੋਜੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਸ ਦਾ ਵਿਰੋਧ ਕਿਉਂ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ, ਇਹ ਮਾਮਲਾ ਕਿਉਂ ਤੂਲ ਫੜ ਗਿਆ, ਕੌਣ ਲੋਕ ਨੇ ਇਸ ਪੂਰੀ ਮੁਹਿੰਮ ਦੇ ਪਿੱਛੇ, ਇਸ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਐਨੀ ਹੋਣ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਵਿਸ਼ੇਸ਼ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ। ਐਨੀ, ਥੈਂਕਸ ਫॉर ਜੁਆਇਨਿੰਗ ਮੀ।
Thank you so much for having me.
So Annie, what exactly is SOGI and why it has become a heated issue?
Yeah, so SOGI, very specifically, is a term we use here in BC. It stands for Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity, and it's a program that was developed through many different professionals. It's almost like a toolkit of sorts. It's a way that we can talk about identity in our classrooms in a safe, age-appropriate way, and it's throughout the province, and it's something that through the Ministry of Education and districts and many other forms. I think what we need to understand is that here in Canada, for many decades, that anybody that was part of the 2S LGBTQ plus community, at least the rainbow community for short, was criminalized. So, for example, being gay was a crime. People lost their jobs over it. We had book bans. And even, we've had teachers had to go all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada, right here in Surrey, to fight for their right to include books that were also like anti-racist, but also those that talked about issues in the rainbow community. So this is a very long history. We have made a lot of progress over the last 20, 30 years. But right now, what we're seeing is a return to the misinformation and the harsh criminalization of students, of teachers, of districts, of all kinds of folks, that because now we have SOGI and other things, anti-racism, where we're now dedicated to really teaching about identity and being, safe and being human in a much more fuller way. So this is nothing new. I think that needs to be made very clear. And the courts and our human rights code very clearly protect every single person in Canada, not just on race or heritage or class or ability, but also gender and orientation.
In your understanding, who are the people and the groups behind the so-called anti-SOGI campaign?
Yeah. So sadly, it's about who they associate with. I can understand that people have different religious beliefs and faith practices, and that's fine. We live in a democratic country. We have freedom of religion, freedom of expression. It's a beautiful thing. However, what I've seen in terms of being on the front lines and what we're seeing in places in countries like in Africa, Uganda, Kenya, also in the United States, where we're seeing a return of these harsh laws and harsh rhetoric, is that it's rooted in white supremacy. It's rooted in colonial mindset, because very simply, for many cultures in the world, the idea of a gender spectrum or different orientations is thousands upon thousands of years old. And it was in fact settler colonization that came in and forced Christianity and other ideas, Eurocentric ideas, onto many different cultures. So I do think that's where it's rooted, unfortunately. It's why it scares me. And more importantly, that there's a dedication to kind of anti-science and a lack of understanding of what people are talking about, and I don't know where that comes from. That is the scary part. So again, everybody has the right to an opinion that is very clearly in the law. However, there are reasonable limits, And so when you start saying that kids shouldn't have access to books or bathrooms or whatever that might be, medical care, that's when we start infringing on people's rights and actually going against human rights codes, the charter, and many other realities. So, for example, we now have conversion therapy as a crime in Canada, right? So in Canada, our laws are pretty strong in terms of how we defend those rights. And so the groups, and yes, there's a political element to it. We have certain parties that definitely use this anti-SOGI rhetoric as part of their political framework.
I believe some of them were also present at the Vaisakhi parade in Surrey. How problematic was that? On one hand, we were all celebrating the diversity of Canada, while on the other, these people were given space to come and preach. So how problematic was that?
Very problematic, and how glorious of an event, right? Both in Vancouver and Surrey. I think it probably was around 1 million, right? All said and done. I was volunteering for an anti-caste campaign. Again, freedom of expression, right? Anybody can go, anybody can enjoy. However, when you start lying, when you start saying things about a school district and teachers and kids that are simply not true, it becomes dangerous. And I felt personally, trying to learn more about Sikhism and knowing so many people who follow that faith and the principles of Vaisakhi, that those aren't the principles of the faith at all. I see so much incredible work in support of the rainbow community from people of color, from Sikh individuals. So to me, again, it was the lies that were being said and that were being presented that I felt were problematic. You know what? They can be there, right? Like, I'm not trying to say people can't exist in certain spaces, but we have to be careful, again, reasonable limits about what can be said and how you portray people, because the history is clear. The rates of violence against the rainbow community, the rates of mental health, the rates of criminalization are higher for people that are part of the LGBTQ community. We cannot hide those statistics. So we have to be very careful about how we talk about these issues. We can question, we can dialogue, we can ask, we can choose to follow a faith that maybe doesn't quite believe in that. Those are all okay, but you cannot hurt other people. And I do feel that space wasn't necessarily appropriate for that kind of messaging to be there. Again, they have they're citizens, they have the right to exist and to say, but as a teacher, I was greatly offended by how teachers were being represented on their posters and the messaging that they were talking to people about.
Now, being a supporter of SOGI, what kind of challenges you are facing, both within and outside the school system?
I think, sadly, misunderstanding and misinformation. I have to speak on behalf of other teachers that have lost their jobs, where they want to present to PAC, they want to present to parents and students, and they face a lot of backlash. We've seen attacks where people are called groomers and pedophiles, and a lot of very derogatory and again, criminalizing language, which is objectively false. And again, a major misunderstanding. We're not sexualizing kids. We're not talking about sex, right? We are simply talking about human rights, the idea that gender does not have to be in a box, right? If you are a boy, it's okay to wear pink. If you're a girl, it's okay to wear pants, right? And also that you shouldn't bully another person because they're different than you. That's really where it's at. And again, it's age appropriate, and there's a huge, long thing, and it's just more about existing in a school that is safe for all, where we don't discriminate against people. That's what we're trying to teach. And instead, what's coming at us, unfortunately, by a minority. But it's sad to see how in the States, the minority groups are passing laws that are like literally they want to kidnap children. There are book bans. There are libraries sitting empty. Like and we've seen this in Canada as well. Nothing has passed, but again, we're seeing this presence now. We're seeing this pushback. So I do think the misinformation is the biggest problem, and it's just me and many others wanting to have dialogue about what is actually happening in schools and to understand that we're all in this together, and it really is about keeping children safe, but also to understand that human rights lets you be different.
Right.
Bottom line.
So what course of action you are planning to challenge this?
Yeah, so the course of action that we're taking on is very simply going to be students and teachers and community really engaging in dialogue that hopefully will clear the air and focus on human rights. So one of the things we want to do is hold an interfaith panel, bring in a Muslim speaker, a Sikh speaker, a Jewish speaker, a Christian speaker, indigenous. We'll do our best to get a nice round compilation of folks. And the idea to be, how do we stand up for human rights and how do we help protect people that are different from us, that are part of the rainbow community, and how do we really make sure that when we're learning about these things, we do it in a safe way. We do allow people to have different faith practices, but again, in a country that I believe can be devoted to justice and really the protection of human rights, actually, everybody that I talk to, no matter their faith, stands up for the rights of others. It is beautiful when students who are Muslim and Sikh and Hindu and Christian and all kinds come together to celebrate the idea of love, right? To celebrate the idea that, their friends can dress the way they want and, use the bathrooms that fit them and use the pronouns that they identify as. It's a beautiful thing. And I want the community to see that. And I want us to really have that dialogue so that if in different spaces people are misunderstanding or they come from a different viewpoint, let's talk about it in a safe way and in our schools. So that's one thing. And just celebration. We're really looking forward to bringing in community members, especially BIPOC community, because that's what our school is, to really kind of celebrate all of our identities and how beautiful that is. That's what we're trying to do. And hopefully kind of dispel some of the lies. Teachers are there to facilitate what is hopefully a happy growth environment where everybody sees each other as equal and we fight for human rights together. So that's one of the things we're planning in May.
Definitely. Well, and it was nice talking to you. Thank you so much for your time. Is there anything I
Thank
can
you
ask you
so
before
much
I
for
let you go?
having me as always. Thank you.
Take care. Bye for now.
Bye.
ਦੋਸਤੋ ਅਸੀਂ ਯਾਨੀ ਹੋਣਾ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕਿ ਸੋਜੀ ਬਾਰੇ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰ ਰਹੀ ਸੀ, ਜਿਸ ਨਾਲ ਕਿਹੜੇ ਭੁਲੇਖੇ ਪਾਏ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਔਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਮਈ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਰੱਖਿਆ ਜਾ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਦਿੱਤੀ। ਸੋ ਇਸ ਅੱਜ ਦਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ, ਮੇਰੀ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਮੁਲਾਕਾਤ ਹੁਣ ਹੋਵੇਗੀ ਐਤਵਾਰ ਨੂੰ ਸੰਡੇ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲ ਵਿੱਚ। ਆਗਿਆ ਦਾ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ। ਹੈਵ ਅ ਗੁੱਡ ਨਾਈਟ।